Turn my ugly mug off. Awesome. We are being recorded. We are off and going. So, Charlie, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mark. And hello, everybody who's here. Glad you made it. I know there's been some technical challenges with various things, and this is the first session of the Dev Week. So hopefully those things will be sorted out as the week progresses. But I'm glad to be here and happy to be the guinea pig. I don't mind at all. So welcome to this presentation on debugging and error handling in ColdFusion. I'm Charlie Arehart, and for those who don't know me, there's some contact information for me. My email address, my social media accounts are all just real simple, Carehart, very easy to find. And I always show that QR code for presentations that I'm given in front of an audience. Well, you guys can take a picture of it too. So you can, and I'll talk about this in a moment, but you can, and if you don't do it right now, don't worry, I'll show it again in a moment. Let's go ahead and get started because we got a lot to cover and only about an hour. All right. So the topic of debugging error handling can mean a lot of things to different people. And I suspect there's different expectations people have. So we're going to talk about what might error handling mean to you. And I'm going to do it in the order of error handling first and debugging second. We'll see why. And then I'm going to talk about the features that are available for dealing with errors in ColdFusion. And there are several. And you might think, oh, there's just a couple. Well, wait and see. We'll see about that. And then what might debugging mean to you? And that'll be, I don't know if we're going to have time to make it the latter half of the talk, and we'll see how much time we have to cover it in much depth. But that means different things to people too, to different people. And I'm going to talk about those different things and then show you the CF features for debugging. And there are a few of them. So they really are different. Now, this talk, the title was given to me by Adobe. I was happy to do it. They didn't define what they wanted it to be. They said debugging first, and they didn't say what debugging meant. So, I'm going to cover it because I'll talk about my background in a moment, but along the way, I'll give you resources for learning more and even a couple more towards the end. I do want to say, and you can hear by me speaking pretty quickly, there's a lot to cover, and I'm just going to skim the surface on a lot of it. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll point out resources all along the way, and my hope here is to share some less obvious tips that you wouldn't pick up from the docs and from people's, blog posts or answers on social media. So quickly about myself, for those who don't know, I just focus on CF server troubleshooting as an independent consultant. I don't work for Adobe, don't work for anybody. And I assist organizations of all sizes and experience levels and work remotely 99% of the time, usually in less than an hour, and teaching you as we go. And your satisfaction is guaranteed. If you don't find the time with me valuable, you won't pay for it. Simple as that. So you can learn more about my rates and my approach and my online calendar at that carehart.org/consulting. I'm not selling anything here, not really even my skills. I'm telling you how to do the stuff to solve problems. And again, the focus here, this isn't what I do normally in my work. I'm focusing on, why is apps crashing, server crashing, things stop working. This talk is really more geared towards just about every developer who invariably is going to hit some problem in their code. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But I'm just saying this is just really fundamental stuff. And remember that this and all the Dev Week sessions are being recorded. The links should be shared with you in an email from Adobe if you registered. And there's some chat about this from before the session started. I'll leave you to read about that. And then I want to say again, the slides for this talk that I'm giving you right now, my slides for this talk are there at carehart.org/presentations. And again, there's the QR code if you want to snap it real quick. But I'm going to hop over and show you that carehart.org site. For those who've never been there before, this is it. And, it's got several sections, but just go to presentations. This takes, that URL I gave you, Kate's right here. I want you to see that I've broken the talks down by year when I gave them. So, the most recent ones are at the top. And this one I'm going to be doing at CF Summit coming up. But this one is today. And you just click on that link and it takes you to the description, which you might have seen from the Adobe website. And then I already have the PDF right there. You can click on that. And then the code that I'm going to show you today, I have it available in a zip. So I'm sure along the way, someone's going to say, hey, where's the code? They're going to come in late, or they're maybe not hearing what I'm saying right now. So we'll tell them then that they can go to that URL. And in fact, I'll tell you what, since somebody's going to try to be helpful, I appreciate this. Someone's going to try to help out and say, hey, Charlie shared the link earlier. Here's the direct link to that specific section for that particular discussion of this topic. All right, let's move on. And I'll try to keep an eye on Yeah, good. So Mark's working on the other issues. Excellent. All right. So error handling, first and foremost. Let's talk about what might error handling mean to you. And on the surface, it's of course simply the process of finding and understanding and resolving errors that happen in your app, right? But more specifically, it can entail tracking when users may report errors, right? To some people, that's what they consider error handling, having a way to track that. Others would think, well, I'll just dig through the logs and diagnostics to watch out for errors. And that's a good thing to do. And we'll talk a bit about that. Then there's features that CF offers to allow you to detect and handle errors. And that's what some people presume is what would be meant by handling errors, error handling. So we'll cover that for sure. And that would be usually with the intent to show some friendly output to the users, and then maybe sending diagnostic information to developers or to a tracking system if you've implemented that. And we'll talk briefly about that. And then mostly when it comes to error handling, it's going to be really helpful to get some additional details about the cause of the problem if you can. And so sometimes there's things you can do in your error handling to help out in understanding the problem. And really that's just a set of possibilities of what error handling might mean. I also want to talk quickly before we get into doing that, what can be the causes for errors? Because sometimes people presume they know there's only so many things that can cause problems. There's really several things that can cause problems. Of course, it could be mistakes in your coding. You could have syntax errors or runtime or logic flow errors. Sure, that could be the problem. There could be unexpected requests, like illegitimate ones, like somebody calling a page that should be behind a login, but they haven't logged in. And if you don't write your page to be defensive, you're going to try to refer to a session variable that doesn't exist. And so that's going to fail. Well, that's just about thinking ahead and going, oh, right. If somebody calls this page and I haven't properly handled this, I've got to deal with it. Well, I'm just saying that would be an error that might only occur once in a while because someone only does that once in a while and you didn't think to account for it. Then there could be malicious requests. And I want to stress this. Sometimes people are chasing their tail after, I don't want to see any errors in the ColdFusion logs. And it turns out a lot of the errors are from malicious requests, from bad guys trying to break in and do stuff they're not supposed to do. And maybe your app is detecting that and handling it and throwing an error. Good for you. That's not a problem to be solved. So just be careful. Sometimes, quote, errors aren't legitimate errors. That's all I'm trying to say. Also, sometimes errors come about because some change in configuration. So before you think, what the hell changed in our code? Sorry for that. But just, who changed our code? Maybe no one changed your code. Maybe somebody changed something in the CF administrator or in doing an update of CF or so on. Like the JVM could have been updated. The web server could have been updated. The web server connector, so many things. Or your database. Somebody could have changed something in the database design or how the database is configured or the data underlying the database. Something could have changed, and it's not about your code. I'm just trying to say sometimes people over focus on what's wrong with my code when there may be nothing wrong with your code. It's that something else happened. And anyway, the bottom line is you might have some problem that gets brought up by any of these problems, and we need to get help to solve those problems. All right. So already I hope some of this is beyond what some people expected when they thought, oh, we're going to be talking about error handling. All right, let's move on. So as far as handling errors, I first want to show you, I'm going to demonstrate calling a page that gets an error. Let me think about this. What was my plan? Yeah, I'm going to show a page that gets an error. I just realized I've left things in a state that are as of things working the way I intended them to work for you. So just give me a second. I'll explain all this later. Just ignore the man behind the screen right now. All right. So if I get an error, this happens to be some code. I'll just quickly open it up so you can see what it is. Just a second. All right, so it's just some code. Sorry, let me bump this up a little bit for some people. It just sets a variable x equal to y, and y is undefined, so it gets an error, right? That's what's called a runtime error. And this is what a user would get on a screen if such an error occurred. The user, and I know I've got a black screen, don't mind that. The point is they're visiting a web page, a CF page that has an error. And if nobody's done anything, then out of the box, this is what they get. and it repeats the error and leaves it at that. Now, some of you are going, oh, I see a lot more than that. Yeah, you're right. Hold on. We're going to talk about how you could see a lot more than that, but maybe in a be good to at least not give out more than this. But somebody could certainly argue, well, wait a minute, my user is not going to know what to do that. They're going to see that screen and go, wait, the what? Enable the what and check the where? That has no meaning to an end user, right? So we're going to talk about making it more friendly for an end user. But the point is, even you as a developer, some of you might go, I wish I could see more about that. Like, can you tell me more? Yes, you can. So one of the first things you can do is in the CF administrator, and I know all of you can't get to your CF administrator, but for those that can get to the administrator, there's a section called debugging and logging. It's the debug button on the left, and it's got a section at the top, first thing you see, called debug output settings. And it's got a setting called enable robust exception information. And if you enable that, it shows more detail. Let's show you that. So we're going to hop back here to the administrator. Here's my administrator. And I said, sorry, just a second. Oh, please. I just was doing something just before we met, and it should not be doing this. I hope this doesn't happen. Oh, goodness. I don't know what happened. Oh, for goodness sakes. Oh, I can't get into my administrator. Oh, that's terrible. The admin did something goofy to me. Oh, and I can't get in. All right. Sorry, everybody. Just I checked it and it was working, and then suddenly now it's not working. I've got to solve this. So just give me a second. This is a good opportunity to say, hey, if you can't log into your administrator, what can you do? There is a password reset. Yeah, exactly. Presenter's curse. Exactly. I just hate that because we already are pressed for time, but I'm just going to move on. So if I go to, I happen to be in my ColdFusion, CFusion bin folder. This is a good thing to be reminded. Some people don't know this, that in the ColdFusions, and this is all version 2025, 2023, 2021, 2018, 2016, all the way back to I think 10 is when it started. In the bin folder, there is a password reset. And on Linux, it's password reset.sh, and in Windows, it's password reset.bat. And you could go to the command line and run this, and you need to. Actually, you could try to run it from here, but it wouldn't run as administrator. So I'm going to get to the command line, run as administrator. Give me a second. Open my command prompt as administrator. I'm not going to explain any of this. You're just getting this for free. And I'm going to do password reset. Come on. There you go. Now, I even have a blog post about this. So if you Google it, you might find my blog post. But I want to change the CF admin password. So you just type 1 and you type in the password. And sure, I'll do an RDS password. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm going to do it. That's for another talk for another day. I see some chats coming up. There you go. Exactly. It is helpful. You know, this is where you can learn a lesson unexpected. I just hate that we wasted time on this. So now I should be able to say this. Oh, sorry. I have to restart ColdFusion. Duh. Yes. I wish it would tell you that. That would be really nice. And yes, I have every version of CF known to exist. And I'm running on Windows, sure. You know, shoot me. Believe it or not, most people really using ColdFusion these days are still running on Windows more than Linux or Mac. I know some of you don't believe that, but I'd spend my day solving problems and on every kind of platform, and the majority are still using Windows, but that's not the point of today's talk. So again, I just restarted. You know, it's a little slow to get started. All we have to hope is that I successfully get logged in. Please let me in. Oh, it's just that there's several parts of this talk that shows doing admin settings. So we're going to want to be able to see the admin for sure. It'd be really difficult for me to change things around to not do that. Of course, I could implement another version. I guess I could switch to using, yeah, you know what? I might just switch to using CF 2023 because I don't know why suddenly this is not responding. Oh, yeah, there you go. Good deal. All right. So here we are back in the admin. And for those who aren't on CF 2018 or above, yes, this is what you see in CF 2018 or above, a whole new look to the debugging, to the admin. Anyway, I said under debugging logging, which is this button right here, debugging and logging. First thing you go to is debug output settings. Now, back on track, what we were talking about was this here, right here, robust exception information. That's Whether that's turned on or not for you by default depends on how someone installed ColdFusion. There's something called the production profile and development profile and secure profile. And we're not going to discuss all that. Point is, this may or may not be turned on automatically for you. I'm going to turn it on and check it out. When I turn it on and hit submit, that's all I got to do. Now I'm going to go back to that test page that was getting the error right there. Watch the little differences, and was it worth all that? Well, hold your thought. So if you do something that has an error, now you see the code and you see what's called a stack trace with lots of other detail. And the point here to be aware of is that, well, from a production, security standpoint, you don't want to be showing this to people, right? But in development, you do. So if you're a developer, you'd want to turn this on, and that's how you can do it in the admin. All right, so that's that. Let's move on. Again, that's just one thing in the admin that I want to show you. There's going to be plenty more. And the point is, that's what shows up if you don't handle the errors, right? We're going to talk about handling the errors, but if you don't, and some people in development don't want to handle errors, they want to see the errors, well, you need to be aware that you'll see the errors if you don't handle them. If you want to see more details, you got to turn on that setting. And don't do it in production, but sure, in development, it makes sense. Next, I want to tell you that, and it's really something to think about, as long as you can get to those CF logs can be really valuable, more valuable than many people appreciate. So first of all, there's an application log. And whenever an error occurs, a line is written to that application log. And I'm talking about in the ColdFusion, CFusion logs folder. So let me just show you up here at the top, ColdFusion, CFusion logs folder, right? And then there's a whole bunch of things. And we're going to look at the application log. And I happen to have a viewer for stuff, so I know it's not an editor, but don't worry about that. Look, there's the error that I just had, and I don't think I can just click buttons and zoom in, but so apologies if it's a little too small for you to read, but it just repeats the error. Literally, the error that I just had is repeated on screen. So yes, if you get an error and it's not handled, then by default, ColdFusion logs it. And so you might go, yeah, I've always wondered, how could I know that the user was having an error? They're not telling me they're having an error. You can watch this application log. Absolutely. And you can see all different kinds of errors that I've been demonstrating and setting things up. Anyway, so that's cool. The application log has that error. It's a single line of error, and it has a template and a line number. Now, let me just tell you, it's often wrong. Hold that thought. I know some of you are thinking, yeah, I've looked at that log, and it said it was on file XYZ, and the problem was really in file ABC. You're right. That can happen. So there's an exception log. Many people don't even look at this. The exception log shows a multi-line error set of error info, and it includes that thing that we saw on the screen called the stack trace, and that stack trace has the correct information. So let me show you. In fact, I think I had a demo. Was it the include? Let me see if this include demonstration points it out. Oh, I deleted it, because I don't think it really did it. But anyway, sometimes you won't see that file name in there. What I'm saying is, again, I know it's a little small, but this, my file that I requested was called errortest.cfm, and the line number was 2. You will sometimes find that is not accurate, and you'll go, that doesn't make sense. I looked at line 2, that doesn't have even the code. There's no CF code on that line. Right. Well, it may be that the file is not the right file. But I'm just telling you, if that ever happens to you, look for the exception log right there, the exception log. And I'm just going to go right to the bottom. And here's the exception that just occurred. And again, apologies, that's a little small. But that's the same line that was in the application log, but it goes on and offers all this additional detail. And it so happens that right there is in the stack trace. Don't worry if you don't know what that is. Just trust me, that thing that's below the error message, usually within a few lines at the top of it, it tells you the actual line of code, and that will be accurate for sure. All right, so that will be valuable for some of you. Okay, now the ColdFusion out log, some people tend to look at that. The ColdFusion out log, if you didn't know it, it aggregates log lines from a bunch of logs, one of which is the application log. So yes, somebody could argue, I just watched the ColdFusion out log. You're right, but it's a lot of other stuff in addition to the application log. So you might want to look at the application log first, the exception log for the more detail, or if you like, look at the out log. You might wonder, what about this ColdFusion error log that's in there? Well, that error log rarely has information about CF page request errors. It may have stuff that's of value for other errors. I'm not saying it's not valuable. It's absolutely valuable. But just when you go looking at the ColdFusion error log, that's not the right place to look for, hey, did my code have an error? It's going to be the application log, the exception log, and so on. Okay. So these things can help you in assessing if a problem has happened. But what about detecting the problem and handling it instead and giving a friendlier message to the end user? Absolutely. So that's what most people think of as error handling. And ColdFusion definitely has ways to allow detection of the errors and controlling what they see. And you can do additional stuff like storing the error in a database or writing it to a log or whatever you want to do. Send yourself an email. Absolutely. So first of all, this is the most important part. At the server level, in the CF administrator, there's something called the site-wide error handler. And that site-wide error handler is a way that you can have something else appear to the user. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let me just show you first. Let me back up. We were in this errors directory. This is where I've got a bunch of stuff. And remember, I told you I've got a zip of this errors directory. You can go look at it on my site. What was I thinking? Oh, right. No, I don't want to see that. Right. I don't want to see that. I want to go to the administrator. So I'm just so discombobulated from that problem earlier. I was so disappointed. It cost us time. All right. So I've got the robust exception on. We're going to move on. Up here on the first blue button, it's now it's the black button, but when you're on any other button, it's the first blue button. And the first thing that comes up is settings, the very first settings of the very first button, way down towards the bottom of that page. Way down. I wish Adobe, please think about breaking this page up into different parts. It's gotten just too huge. So anyway, just gonna look for error. We'll find it eventually. There you go. Site-wide error handler. So in the CF admin, under settings, server settings, site-wide error handler. I just realized I didn't put that breadcrumb into my presentation. Sorry about that. Anyway, here, you can name a file, and that's what I was going to do. I was going to show you that in my errors directory, I have something I've just gone ahead and called, site error handler.cfm. Don't worry about it. And for now, it doesn't do much. It just puts out a message to the screen, and then it dumps something. I'll talk about that in a second. So it's in this folder in my CFusion www root. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but the point is there's errors as a folder, and it's called sitehandler.cfm. So I'm going to set up to point to that, and we'll talk about, that's not where my web root is. Hold that thought. So back to the admin, I'm going to say /errors/ siteerrorhandler.cfm. Simple as that. All right. So look, it's not an absolute path. You can't put an absolute path in. And it says a relative path to a template. Well, that's true. But you will find that it only works if the template is defined in the ColdFusion root. Now, in my case, I'm running, there's only one instance. It's called the CFusion instance. If you had an instance called Bob, then you'd be in the Bob www root. Under ColdFusion 2025, if you had, prod1, it'd be prod1 www root. And then I've created a folder in there called errors, where I have these examples and all this code. And I'm telling my site-wide error handler, hey, it's that name in that folder, and I'm not telling it where it is. CF presumes to look for it in whatever is the www root of this instance. And by the way, here's the name of the instance in the top right corner. If you ever wonder, that's the name of the instance. Again, most of you, there's only ever one instance called the CFusion instance. But if you have more than one instance, then it's going to say Bob or prod1 up here. And then you're going to want to put this thing pointing to something in the Bob1 www root or the prod www root under ColdFusion, whatever version you're running. Anyway, enough of that. Let me hit submit. And it says updated successfully. Now, let me just tell you, if you make a mistake, it doesn't say updated successfully. In fact, let me just show you. It's not really what I want to focus on, but it's going to happen to some of you. So I want to show you what I experience, and I assume you do it as well. I'm going to call it Site Error Handler 2. And there's nothing, and there's no error, and it's just like a weird couple of lines right there. And if you were to right-click and do let me get off of that. Right-click and do a view frame source. This is a frame. In that frame, we'd see an error that it's really deep down in there, but it says that there's an error that it didn't find that file. So just take my word for it. You can't do that. And if you do it, you'll get that error. And it just set it back to what it was by default. So it's set. It didn't change it. It tried to change it, didn't change it. It's left it what I submitted. So I've already submitted this. We saw that it took. So now check it out. When I go to that page that had that error, watch this. Instead of seeing that detail, I now see what I said to do in that error handler. Now, it was just one line of code. I literally wrote out caught by the site-wide error handler, and I happened to put in there what is the name of the error handler. You'll see how I did that in a moment. And I wrote the current time. And then I did a dump of a thing called the error scope. So this is a dump of the error scope. Now let's look at the code. It'll make more sense now to look at it. And let me turn on word wrapping. And by the way, those of you who use VS Code, you know, I'm on a tiny monitor, so when I turn this wrapping on, it looks crazy, but Alt-Z, 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 word wraps, whatever you're looking at in VS Code. I'm in VS Code. ColdFusion Builder is running in VS Code. You don't have to be using ColdFusion Builder. We're not talking about that today. Anyway, this has nothing to do with CF Builder. It's just a VS Code, Visual Studio Code, Alt-Z to turn on word wrapping. Anyway, look at this. I said caught by, and I've underlined it because you're going to see different examples where I look at different things. Caught by the error handler, and in where is this error handler, that function called get current template path says where the error handler is. Now I just want to point out, you might have been told recently you should use get base template path because get template path has gone away in 2025. Well, get base template path would be the page that was requested. Get current template path, believe it or not, is the name of the error handler. I'm just telling you, for diagnostics, so you're trying to solve problems, it'll help you to know that if you use that, you'll know what error handler file you're looking at. Because remember, it said specifically, I was caught by the site-wide error handler in, and there it is, site error handler.cfm. And then I wrote out the current time now. And then I did a dump of the error scope. And I want to point out that, and it's not a scope, it's a variable. I should change this to say variable. It's not a scope. Some people call it a scope. It's not a scope. It's a struct. Anyway, it's the variable struct called error. And check it out. In that struct, there's a error.browser, error.diagnostics, error.generated content, blah, blah, blah. Lots of stuff. And so error.diagnostics is the actual error. Okay. And then there's even an error.message. And those can be helpful. You can do stuff with those if you want to. And in my code here, you know, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and do something with error.message and error.diagnostics. Yeah, we'll move on because we got a lot of ground to cover. I'm keeping an eye. I haven't seen anything follow up yet. So I mentioned this. All right, enough. Moving on. Now that's site-wide error handling, right? So you set it in the admin, and it applies to all. It should really be called server-wide. It's server-wide error handling. It's the CF instance-wide error handler that applies to every app on the server. Well, what if your app, you want to do different stuff? Well, yep, ColdFusion's got you covered, has for many years. Classically, there was a CF error tag, and then more recently, there's an on error method, and I'm going to show you both of these. So here's the classic CF error for those who don't yet use application CFC. In your application CFM, you could say CF error type equal exception. Sorry, and then I point to a template. My bad. I should point to a template there. We'll see an example of it in a moment. So you could point to any template you want, and that's going to be used by that application, and it could be anything you want it to be. So just real quick, I do have an application CFM, not currently using it. We'll talk about why in a second. And sorry, so here, okay, this should say exception. Oh goodness, and this has unfortunately been pushed up to the zip, so I'll correct the zip and upload it. That should say type in exception. Let me turn on the wrap again. So it's CF error type equal exception template equals, and then whatever you want. And that would be relative to the directory where this lives. So it's my application CFM. Usually it's going to be in the root of my website. Then in the root of my website, if I have an app error handler, it's going to find it. Okay. And I have an app error handler file right there. And again, I just have it saying caught by, and I didn't do my little underscore there. I'll update things and repost the zip. Don't worry about that. You can get it after the session. Anyway, and now that currently is not going to be running because this application CFC takes precedence. We'll talk about using application CFC in a moment. But for those that are still on application CFM, if I now come in here and What am I missing? What am I missing? Application CFM. Yep. Oh, come on. There's no error there. It's not the problem. What am I missing? I should be intercepting that error now. It's definitely there. It's called application CFM. It's got a tag called CF error. What? Sorry. This is what we want to be looking at. Application CFM. Yep. Yep. And that was the name of the file. Yep. Well, let me just say this about that. This is a point I make later. If you ever have a mistake in your application level error handler, then it's ignored and it goes up to the site-wide error handler. And I have a feeling that's what's going on. And I don't see the error. I mean, there's only a couple lines of code here, but I'll tell you what. Let me just take it all out for the moment. Nothing in there. And does it go blank? Yeah, okay, so there's definitely a problem in there. What did I do wrong? There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe it's the scope is not error. No, I must have a mistake here. I don't. Do anybody see it? Oh, well, yeah, thank you. Good, there you go. I don't know how that happened. What the? I had this all a long time ago working. Thank you for that. That's it. There you go. Thank you for that. So check it out, everybody. This now says caught by the application level error handler, right? So I know this is not what you would show an end user. That's not my point. I'm saying if you're going to put in error handling, you can do whatever the heck you want in your error handler, make it a pretty message, help you as a developer understand better what's going on. I'm just showing you, yes, you can use this to diagnostically prove, yes, I've caught that error, not by the site-wide error handler, but instead by the application level error handler. That's all. And it's dumping the error scope. I really don't know how that CF output got gone from there. And I'm using tags in some stuff and script in others. Again, let's not get bogged down in that. But thank you for that, Rob, thank you for catching that. Don't know how that happened. I've run through all these multiple times. Anyway, moving on. It was just must have hit a key and deleted it by mistake. Again, I'll upload the corrected zip. So that's the CF error type equal exception. In fact, let me just get this right because I may not remember to do it. Real quick, template equals. I'm just going to pop that into this. Sorry to have you see making the sausage, but if I don't do it now, I could forget. Cool. Just leave it at that. Moving on. All right. Now, that was the CF error tag approach. And by the way, that CF error can be used in an application CFC. It's the older of the two. But on error is the relatively more modern. I mean, it's in CF7. Pretty sure that's when the whole application framework stuff came out. Anyway, it's not new, but it's relatively, quote, more modern. And it's a method of application CFC. Now, if I rename that application CFM to not take, actually, I don't even need to do that. My bad. Don't need to do that because if you have an application CFC, it takes precedence. Just a little tip, if you didn't know, if you have both, the application CFM is ignored, only the application CFC runs. I'm going to open it. Now, I've got the method in there, but I had changed it to say error 2 earlier in the presentation. You might remember I'd renamed that. That was so you didn't see it intercepting it, but I'm going to change there. I'm just going to do that. I've just renamed, renamed the method called on error. I'll show it in a moment. But see, it says now it's caught by the application level on error handler. Well, what is that about? Real simple. So it's in an application CFC, for those who know what that is. I happen to have a script-based one here, so don't worry about that. Here it is on error. It takes an argument called exception. Let me turn on the wrapping. And You can do whatever you want in there. And I'm just writing out to the screen that the error was caught by this on error method. And I say more stuff in these comments about it's the variable in there is called exception. It's not error, it's exception, right? It was passed in as exception. I can refer to it as exception, arguments.exception technically. Anyway, and this is 2025. I don't think I have any special stuff in there, but technically it should be arguments dot. I'll just go ahead and change it so there's no question, and I'll refresh it. Yep, there you go. So technically, well, when I update the zip, it'll be there as arguments dot exception. All right, so that's that. So it's really that simple. You can do whatever you want in that on error method. Finally, I want to say that at the code level, you can do a CF error in any template you want. Yeah, you can put that in any, and it'll just affect that template at runtime because it's a runtime directive. When it's in application CFM, it applies to the whole application. Technically, it applies to every request in the application. Anyway, moving on. Then, as some know, there's try-catch capabilities in every language, and CFML's had it for a long time. And there's CF try and CF catch, or the script equivalents of try and catch. And I'll show examples of both of those. So let me first just run one to show what will happen when I do it. There you go. So I'm calling a template called try catch test, and I detected the error. Well, let's look at that code called try catch test. Okay, so in it, this is the key for those who don't ever work with this stuff. Just look, there's that CF set x equals y, which should create an error for me. Well, if you wrap something that you want to try and say, does it work? Yes or no. You wrap it in a try, and I'll show the script in a moment, but in tags, it's try and a closing try, and inside of it, CF catch and a closing CF catch, and inside of there, whatever you want to do. So I just put in the words, I detected the error, and then the name of the variable in here is called CF catch. CF catch, that's the built-in variable that gets created by ColdFusion to hold the error details. So then when I ran it, I detected the error and I did a dump. Actually, I think I see a typo there, right? It should say CF catch. No, not a big deal, but point is, I'll get that updated when you guys get the zip. So it's the CF catch struct, and you can see there's the message, and there's lots of other stuff. Sometimes there's detail, sometimes there's not, and I'll leave you to explore that on your own. All right. Now, just before I forget, I had in the screens there a couple things I want to show you. Let's go back to like the application CFC. And it's true for the application CFM. If you want to, you can write the log out to a log file. If I do that write log command, it'll write that to a log. We'll come back to that in a second. If I want to, I can redirect the user to some friendly page. There's the CF include and script. You could do a CF location if you wanted to. And I do the same thing in the application CFM. I just realized I didn't show you the script-based. Yeah, there you go. Here's the script-based version of a try-catch. It's a little bit different. I should take a moment to show you this. It's not nicely formatted. Yeah, it's probably better formatted. Yeah, everybody's got their own preferences for how they write stuff. Anyway, the point is, I'm trying the thing that I want to try in script, and then I'm catching it. Okay, and I'm doing whatever I want to do. So it's just a little formatting difference. Oh, that's another point I want to make is, does it continue running after it catches it, right? So let's do the script-based one. So it said I detected the error and I did the dump, but look, it says I keep going. So when you do a catch, you do whatever you want to do in there, and then CF acts as if it never happened. For those in the US that know about that commercial, it's as if it never happened. The error just literally is ignored. You do whatever you do in the catch. And there's lots more you can do. I'll leave you to read the docs. I'll point you to docs. You can do far more. We're really running out of time. I got to move on. But if you don't tell it to, for example, abort, then it's going to continue doing whatever was after the try, right? So there you go. All right. Yeah, I got to move on. There's so many things I'd love to tell you, but let's move on. And I'm not seeing any questions or comments. So just some additional points. The order of handling is, if there's a try catch, it catches things first. If there isn't, or if there's an error in there, it goes up to the application level one. And if it isn't there, or if there's an error in one, then it goes up to the admin level one. Thank you, Ripley. So And I want to repeat that if there's an error in any lower level error handler, then it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and it passes the error up to the next level. And if there isn't anything, then it ultimately dumps to the user on the screen, which for most of you is what it probably does out of the box. Anyway, I want to point out as well, check this out. If you handle the errors, no log entry is created in the application log or the exception log. Yes, hear that. If you handle the errors, except a site-wide error handler. And that's not something everybody knows. If you do a site-wide error handler, it still logs it. But if you do error, try catch, on error, try CF catch, any of those, you should consider doing that logging that I showed. Write out a log to the log file or store it in a database. Just do something, because nobody would know, right? I know a lot of people send an email to Bob, and then Bob gets fired or leaves the company. Now nobody's getting the email that says there's an error occurring. But if you were to write it to a log in the error handler, you can use CF log or write log. And I show that in comments and all those examples. Lastly, I want to talk about, or not lastly, but next I want to talk about compile time versus runtime errors. Check this out. Only that site-wide admin level error handler can handle compile time errors. That's important to understand. That again, that try catch, CF try, CF catch, on error, CF error, they can't, because they're runtime things themselves. So if it can't run the page because those have an error, it can't run the error handler. But the site-wide error handler is different. So I'm just telling you, I've got an example to prove it. I want to move on. And again, if there's no site-wide error handler, then a compile time error ends up dumping on the screen. And it does get logged. Remember, it all gets logged. And if you don't handle it, it gets logged. Also, this is very important. Hear this, everybody who cares about this stuff. That robust exception handling we talked about earlier, that's got no impact on your error handling. I know people think it does. No, it doesn't. It doesn't have any impact. Whether you have that turned on or not, you're going to get what you get in the error handler regardless. So anyway, moving on. I want to tell you too that there's error handling frameworks that work with CFML or can work in CFML, and they can help you handle errors in a much more well-organized manner. And I list them on my site called cf411.com. If you go to cf411.com/error, you'll see I've got pointers to both ColdFusion and non-ColdFusion error handling frameworks, which can be amazing. And you should look into them. It takes a lot of the burden off of your hands. For example, instead of getting an error, like let's say you send emails whenever there's an error. Well, hell, if you suddenly get blown up with 1,000 errors, you get 1,000 emails. Well, these error handling frameworks are more intelligent. They will keep track of the errors and only send you an email every 1,000 errors or whatever, or one a day, or no more than one an hour. Again, that you're not going to figure that logic out in our typical CF code. You could if you want to, but you don't have to. There's code that does it, and I'll leave you to look into that. I also want to tell you that I know we went through this really fast. There's ample documentation from Adobe. This is not the CFML reference. Everybody pay attention. I know the CFML reference is what comes up when you Google stuff all the time. The CFML reference is like a dictionary, right? You don't learn a language by reading a dictionary. You learn a language by being taught in a tutorial style, typically, or whatever. We're not going to talk about that. But the point is, ColdFusion has a guide called Developing ColdFusion Applications. And it's like 3,000 pages of wonderful stuff. And in there's a section on error handling. So this is, there's going to be bits and pieces of this in the CFML reference, but much of what I've shown you is in that documentation. I also have a 4-part series on error handling I did a long time ago, but it's still relevant today. And there's the URL to get to it. I'm recommending you might enjoy reading it, even though it's 25 years old, because certain fundamentals of what we talked about really haven't changed. Now, there's some things that are newer since then I don't cover, but the point is, a lot of what I covered is there. All right, let's move on to handling missing templates requests. Missing templates, that's very different. So in the admin, there's also a missing template handler. And if you choose to configure it, you will get that. Now, if you don't, let me just show you a quick example of, here's me calling a page that doesn't exist. Error test 2 doesn't exist. And the average user would get this kind of weird looking error message. And because we have the robust exception handling on, we get these details down here at the bottom. Point is, that's not very friendly, right? So you can go to the admin and you can create point 2, if you have one, a missing template handler. And I have one here called site. Where is it? Oh, I called it admin. Admin, right? Because it's not a site-wide error handler. It's just the admin error handle, missing template handler. So I called it admin missing template handler. So it's in that same folder. Again, you'll have that for yourselves. And I'm just going to pop that in there and hit submit. Took it, didn't complain, no error. I'm going to go to that tab that had that right there. And now if I hit refresh, the user doesn't get that message anymore. We've intercepted that they asked for a file that doesn't exist. The admin level missing template handler that for me is in my template of that name has intercepted it, and it's got an error struct, and it tracks what they asked for. They asked for error test 2, and it said file not found. All right, so I'm just going to quickly look at that. It's really very simple, like before. Again, it's not for pretty, it's to show you functionality. And then I talk about what you can dump and then what you can log and what you can redirect to and stuff like that. So that's just the site-wide, server level missing template handler. And again, specify relative path. Or at the application level, you can do an on missing template in your application CFC. You can say a method called on missing template. So if we check out my application CFC. Now I had renamed it so that it wasn't stepping on us and getting in the way, but there you go. If I take it out, there it is, on missing template. I'm just gonna, for now, run it and show you how it changes things. See, now it's the app level on missing template handler. And I have written out that it was caught by that. And I've written out what was the page that they requested, because in that, it's called target page argument that, this is just defined by Adobe. It's documented, again, in those manuals I talked about. That's the name of the file they would have asked for. And you could write it to the screen or write it to a log. And you saw I was writing it to the screen. They asked for error2.cfm. So again, knock yourself out, do whatever you want with it. That's what you can do with the app level error handler. And I didn't do a demonstration of this, but try catch can also intercept a particular kind of exception. My example showed accepting any kind of exception. I didn't focus on that, but you could tell it to handle specifically a missing include if you wanted to. Absolutely. And another bonus tip I want to share with you, if you don't handle your errors either of these ways we've talked about, then there's a cfadmin setting on the settings page that also can have an influence on what appears to people in their browsers and stuff like that. So back up here at the top level, settings, server settings, it's called this, enable HTTP status codes. Just want to talk about it for a second. So again, it's at the server level, settings, enable HTTP status codes. If you don't handle the error, then what status code gets sent back from ColdFusion to the browser or to the API client or whatever it is it's calling CF. And that might or might not be important that it be a correct status code like 404 or 500. Or you might want it to, no, give it 200. Always give it 200. I've got text. I'm explaining the problem. Give it a 200. Well, sorry. ColdFusion has text and it's explaining the problem, right? Well, if you don't have an error handler, you can get HTML back. Well, sometimes it can be important to make it send back those status codes or to not. And I just want you to know there's that option there. It's not really important for us to focus on any more than that. I'll just leave it at that. Okay. I also want to say that if you guys use IIS, any of you that use IIS, there's an IIS setting that might keep you, and this is very important for people who use IIS, hear me, that would keep you from seeing all your error details. It's designed to prevent sharing details to end users by default. And it's called, under error pages in IIS, it's called, under edit feature settings, it's called detailed errors for local requests, custom error pages for remote. I'd love to demo it and all that, but we're running out of time. I got to leave it at that. If you use IIS, check that out. I'll leave you to explore that. And then there's a related setting in what's called the ColdFusion WSConfigs file called ISAPI redirect properties. And it's called IIS skip custom errors enable. Again, I'll leave you to look into that more on your own. It might be necessary in some cases. It defaults to false. You can set it to true. When you're handling errors and you want to control whether or not IIS shows its custom 404 paging. I'm going to leave it at that to say this is too much for most of us to get in our heads right now. Lastly, I want to say some people do modify their IIS error pages to point to a CFM page to do something. And you can do that. That's beyond the scope of our discussion today. I just wanted to point those things out in passing. I also want to say that if you have CF monitoring tools, they offer error tracking. If you use the PMT, Performance Monitoring Tool Set, which is free, but only optionally installed, it offers an errors graph on its CF server page, and you can drill into requests and see the errors that they had. Sweet. If you use the PMT, check that out. And then if you have Fusion Reactor, which is commercial with a free trial and a developer edition, they offer a request error history page showing the most recent 100 paid requests that had errors by default. And you can drill into them to see an available tab called error, and you can see the error that happened in there. That's pretty nice that you don't have to have handling, or if you don't have handling, or if your handling's not working, if you have these monitors, you can look at them to see what's going on. And then I want to say as well that rather than wait for errors, and I kind of wish this was the all we had to talk about. You guys Adobe threw in debugging, and I have a whole section on that. We'll see how quickly I can get through that. But there's enough to talk about just error handling. Anyway, I want to say that rather than just wait for errors to occur, you can anticipate some of the errors by code analysis tools. So first of all, in the CF admin, there's long been a code compatibility analyzer. I want to just show you real quick for those who go, wait, what? I've never seen that before. Now, when you're looking for something that you've never seen before, rather than try to remember what button I told you to go to, since 2018, there's a search button. Look right up here at the top, it's a search button, and you can just type compat. And it comes up as code analyzer, and it says it's in the debugging and logging section. So it's going to take you right to the page. There it is. So in the debugging section, all the way on the right under code analyzer, yes, this has existed since as far as I can remember. I started working with CF3. I believe it was there in 4. Point is, you can point to a directory and tell it to analyze your code. And I'll leave you to explore this and the tabs and the buttons and the advanced options. The point is, it'll do an analysis of your code for compatibility. And sometimes it'll identify problems, especially if you're going from one version of CF to another. Hey, before you just try to run your code and see how it goes, you can run the compatibility analyzer, and it might tell you, hey, there's going to be a problem. And it's not always accurate, but it's definitely worth trying. Also want to tell you that since CF 2021, which has packages, this notion of packages, well, there's a package manager, and it has a scan capability, and you can run it against your code. And if you or someone who administers your CF server hasn't properly put in the packages that are needed, you're going to get an error that says, hey, you didn't add the package needed to do a call to Postgres or to do CF HTML to PDF because you didn't add the HTML to PDF package. My point is, you don't have to wait for the error to occur. You can run the package manager scan tool, literally point it at your code, and it will say, well, for your code in this folder and all of its subfolders, here's the packages you would need. And then you'd want to make sure the CF administrator had implemented those packages. Or there's ways to automate the package deployment mechanism with Docker, with command box. Again, that's beyond the scope of today to discuss. I also want to say that CF Builder, both the old one and the new one from Adobe that's free, runs for VS Code, there's a security code analyzer. It will identify security code issues, and it could identify potential errors. They may not be errors you would get when you run it, but when a bad guy submits bad guy stuff, it could cause an error. Well, the security analyzer is looking at your code to identify potential security vulnerabilities, some of which could lead to an error. I'm just saying it's another way to scan your code. Finally, some of you know Fixinator, which is commercial. You can learn more at fixinator.app. It's from Pete Freitag. He offers both longstanding, has had code security analysis, and now he also offers compatibility checking. So if you have Fixinator, you can cover both the things up above. But I just want you to know everybody can do any of these things. And the 3 above are free. All right. And I'll just say, I'll talk about using CF Builder as a talk at CF Summit in September. And I'll mention this stuff in passing then too. But there's a whole lot more to talk about that tool than just those things. Anyway, I also want to say, finally, some problems aren't so obviously about CF or about your code. They're problems in some communication between the browser and the server. And if you don't know what's going on, you're going to be at a loss to understand what's happening. I was just on a thread with somebody on the forums yesterday where this was the solution to their problem. So All modern browsers offer this developer tools set of features. And within that, there's a very useful network tab that shows really valuable data about what's being sent to the server from the browser and what's coming back from the server to the browser. And that's just beyond the scope of this talk. But I want to tell you, there's an awesome tutorial, happens to be from Chrome, but doesn't matter, even if you use Safari or Vivaldi or Opera or Firefox, they all have developer tools, and this will apply substantially across all of them. So check it out, really valuable. And it's not trivial. It's lots of screenshots, lots of discussion, really good tutorial. And as you may know, these developer tools can help you with understanding CSS and layout of your HTML and JavaScript issues, and just see the top level of that tutorial for how to use the dev tools for all those things. But again, that's well beyond the scope. Like I said, I wish that we had just said error handling. We'd be done right on time. I'd be bowing and celebrating, dropping the mic, but they're still debugging. And we got 5 minutes left. So let me do what I can do in these 5 minutes we have left. First of all, what might debugging mean to you? Well, on the surface, it's simply the process of trying to understand how your app or your code flow works, right? But again, different folks have different perspectives. Some see it as the CF debugging output that appears optionally at the bottom of a CF page. Some see it as the process of adding code to their app that shows more diagnostic information. Sure. And then others know that that's about stepping through their code line by line. Debugging can be literally line by line, stepping through your code. And I would have asked if anybody had other expectations, but we got to move on. I want to say that each of those three things above are possible with CF, and some are better suited to production. Others are better suited to development. But I want to show you real quickly what I can, even in the little bit of time we have left. First of all, debug output. What is debug output? Well, back to this demo that I had. And sorry, this right there. I just have a little test page right here, a little test page, doesn't matter what it does. And it just runs the page and produces its output. That's all it does. Well, if in the administrator, if you go in to the debug button, to the debug output settings, and you enable this thing called request debugging output, then assuming there's nothing that stops it from working correctly, we'll talk about that in a second. Now, when you go to that page and refresh it, some of you know that you will now see, oh, look at this, all this cool debugging information. All this is just because I turned on that button in the admin. And it tells me what version of CF I'm running, tells me what file I requested, when I requested it, what was my IP address, what was the user agent of my browser. And if the thing took any time, how long did it take? And if it ran through multiple, like if there was an application CFC, there it is. It ran through an application CFC, on and on and on. Lots of cool stuff, really valuable. And then it dumps various scopes, and that's controllable. It dumps by default the CGI scope and the cookie scope and the session scope and some others. So anyway, that's just by turning on that setting in the admin. All right. So it's under debugging, logging, debug output settings. You enable that. You can limit who sees that by IP address, right? That wouldn't be good for everybody to see. You can do that in the admin. Check this out. If I go back to the admin, there's a button up here, a link that says debugging IP addresses. And by default, it may have nothing in it, or it might have something in it. Depends on how things are configured in your server, or if it's your own machine. Point is, you can add any IP address you want. Now, I made this request here, there, as localhost. So you would think, okay, well, if I say I'm going to limit it to only 127.0.0.1, now I shouldn't see that debug output, right? There you go. And I don't. But I'm going to tell you that some of you will find that doesn't work. And it might be because you're using IPv6 and you might have to add : 1. And you can do that in modern versions since about CF 2016 and above. You can do the IPv6. Also, some of you know that there's a button right there called Add Current. And you can click that button and it adds whatever is your current IP address. You don't have to even know. But you're not always sitting on the machine that has the admin to be able to use that button. But it's wherever you ran the admin, whatever browser you're in, when you ran the admin, when you click Add Current, it's wherever you are. Now I saw, yeah, I made that button. Now, good for you, Dave. That's awesome. Dave is wonderful. I bow at Dave Watts' feet. I've learned so much from him 25 years ago and ever since then. So anyway, back to where we were going. Listen, this is important. If you don't set any value in that debug IP addresses, then the debug output is shown to everybody that visits your page. That's definitely not suitable for production. So for production, you should have some value in that here. You should have some value. If you remove everything, everybody's going to see debug output. And I talked about that. And there's a blog post about that issue when it was a problem back in earlier versions. I also want to say you can control whether that debug info is shown on your page. Yeah, check this out. You might go, well, yeah, I want to see it most of the time, but sometimes I really don't want to see it. So there's a tag in CF and there's an equivalent script. It's called CF setting, show debug output equals false. And if you put that on a page, then you won't see it. And I believe I had that set up and ready to go in that demo. Oh, crap, I had that in another folder. Just a second. Apologies. I had that set up before. Yeah, pretty sure. Yeah, that's the code that I'm calling right now in that tab. Yep, root demos test.cfm. So check it out. In that template, I'm going to add CF setting show debug output equals false or off or no. And if you put that line of code, now you don't see the debugging. Now you might see this word debugging off, and I'm just going to tell you this is a little trick a lot of people don't know about. It's been here forever, since like CF4. There's a function in CF called isDebugMode. And if you've got debugging turned on, that'll be true. If you don't, it'll be false. And so not isDebugMode means debugging is off. And I just wanted you guys to see that when I turn debugging off, it said debugging off. And I'm going to take it out and refresh it, and it doesn't say anything. You know, I could put an else, of course. I could do that. In fact, let me just put this in here and comment it out. By the way, if you use VS Code, there's a toggle block comment feature if you implement CF Builder. But anyway, moving on. So yeah, never leave it blank. Absolutely. All right. So that's that. You could also do that in the application CFM or application CFC, and there's a script equivalent. I just wanted to point out, if you ever have a tag like this and you go, I don't know how to do that in CF Script, just go to Pete's wonderful site called cfscript.me. It's a website, and you just drop in whatever tags you want on the left, and it shows on the right the equivalent script. Wonderful stuff. Thank you, Pete, for that. So debug output doesn't help with CF pages that are producing PDFs and spreadsheets and JSON output. So you might want to turn that off for that, right? So be aware of that. It could even be trouble. So there's some other resource following other options could help. I'm not sure what I meant by that, but you doing what's above would help in that case at a minimum. But moving on, here's the documentation from Adobe about doing that debug output. It's in this discussion in the developer guide. Again, that's not going to be in the CFML reference. Well, the CF setting, if you knew about it, would be in there, but who would know about it if somebody didn't tell you? But the point is, if you read the manual, there's a manual section on debugging and troubleshooting applications, and it covers this topic in there. Next, I want to talk about debugging, outputting your own diagnostics. You can add whatever you want, of course, to a page to show on page or show in the logs. You could use CF output, write output, or CF dump, or write dump. I just want you to know, think about it. You could do whatever you want. And notice this, if a CFC or a function is defined with output equals false, then those outputs you write with CF output, CF write output won't appear. That's where you want to log them instead. So again, there's CF log and write log. And both CF dump and CF log and their script equivalents have a lot more capability than most realize. So do explore those. And there was that debug mode, isDebugMode that I showed you. I also want to say there's other things that could help with that. There's CF trace and CF timer. Those are discussed in that page I showed you. We don't have time to cover that. I knew we wouldn't, so I'm going to move on. Lastly, step debugging, and I know we're right at the bottom of the hour. Mark, you chime in if you want. I could try to cover this really quickly and leave.
You're good. You're good. Go ahead and cover it, Charlie. The next one doesn't start until 11, so go ahead and yeah, dive in.
And 11 is to you, is that 25 minutes from now?
It's in 25 minutes from now, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to take that much time because people are going to be showing up early and they're going to go, what the heck's going on here? So I'll take maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Apologies for those you have to go. Don't forget, these are all being recorded. You can watch the recording after. I'm going to do as much as I can in about 5 or 10 minutes. So check this out, step debugging. Many languages have long had the ability to do line by line, step debugging, stepping through your code. Now, I apologize. I'm sure some of you are like, this is what I wanted to see. Well, I didn't say that in the description, and the word debugging could mean different things to people. But I want to cover this because some people don't know. Yes, many CF people feel left out, that we can't do this step debugging. Yes, you can. And look at this. It's been possible since CF4. What the what? Yes. It was originally offered in CF Studio, which later became Homesite Plus. By the way, Mark, we can hear you typing, so you may want to mute again. It was originally offered in CF Studio and Homesite Plus. I did a talk on it back in '99, and you can still see the PDF right there. So yes, you've been able to do step debugging in CF for 25 plus years. Then CF8 made it possible to do it via what was then called CF Builder, which was the Eclipse-based version. Yeah, and I did a chapter on that in the ColdFusion Web Application Construction Kit for CF8. I had a chapter on showing you how to do that step debugging with CF Builder. Now, I bring that up not because I think you care, although some of you are still using it. I work with people every day. Some people are still using that old ColdFusion Builder. Yeah, check out that PDF. It's right there. There's a link to it from 2010. And then Adobe even still has docs for that old version out there, and I'll just leave you to look at that if you want to. But then with the new free Adobe ColdFusion Builder extension for VS Code, yeah, that offers step debugging. Yeah, absolutely. And this is a different page. Check this out. Those are two different pages. I've underlined the difference. If you're using VS Code, go to this one. Don't go to that other one, because the other one starts out by saying ColdFusion Builder is no longer available. So, that's talking about the old ColdFusion Builder. I wish Adobe, you guys had renamed it. That would have made life so much easier. But anyway, moving on. So step debugging. I just want to tell you, with any of the editors or IDEs that I talked about, setting up that debugging can be challenging. I'm telling you, I've been helping people do it for years. You have to configure the editor and your CF server. By the way, I saw some typing in here. We're not going to see it. Good. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. Slack. Okay. Good. Yeah. Good. I'll leave you guys to pursue that. All right. Moving on. So this is important. Hear this. If you're paying attention to the debugging, this is very important. You have to configure the editor, IDE, and your CF server, and any firewall in between them. If you don't get that stuff right, it ain't going to work. So first, in the admin, there's a place where you enable step debugging. It's under debugging, logging, debugger settings, allow line debugging. It's a checkbox. You click that checkbox. Then you have to have this thing called RDS enabled, which I talked about in passing when I had to reset my password earlier. RDS is Remote Developer Services. It was introduced with CF4, and it's been around forever. It's an HTTP communication mechanism between editors that Adobe, or back then Alaire, provided, and ColdFusion Server. Well, you have to have that feature working, and that's right there a showstopper to some people. Well, you might remember I said at the start of this discussion, some aspects of the debugging are only appropriate for development. Some are appropriate for production. RDS is not appropriate to turn on in production. It could be made secure, but we're not going to get into that. Point is, you could configure an RDS password there. So if you have the debugging, allow debugging, line debugging turned on, and if you enable RDS, and then you restart CF, you have now done what you need for CF to work for step debugging. And many people never get to that because they're just doing everything in their editor and don't realize that's only half the battle. The first half of the battle is in the admin. Second half of the battle is in our case, I'm going to show you CF Builder. And it's several steps. And I'm just going to talk about it. I don't have time to show you, but if you just get this stuff and follow the resources, you'll be good. First, of course, you have to implement the CF Builder extension, which is free from Adobe. Again, I'd love to show you, but this isn't the time. I'll be covering that in the CF Summit talk from scratch, start from bare minimum. Anyway, then you open that CF extension. Just real quick, I'm going to show you on the left what I'm talking about. If you have it installed, again, remember I've zoomed out. I'm going to zoom back. There you go. Here's the CF logo that I'm talking about. You have to have that CF Builder extension because then there's other stuff that appears. Let me move on. You have to configure a server that points the editor to your instance of CF, whether it's on your local machine or a remote machine. And again, that's a whole discussion, and there's documentation for it. But right here, this CF servers, it's probably blank. If you implement CF Builder, first time you come to this, it's going to be blank. And you can click plus to add one, or you can click this to import a local server. Again, I don't have time to get into that, but you have to have your server configured. I have my 2025 configured and it's running, and you can even right click it and say launch the administrator, and that proves that it's working. And that's opening my browser and going to the administrator. Again, that's not what I want to show today, but you have to do that. And in that definition of the server, sorry, back to here, I can edit it, right? There's a little pencil icon. It's where is the server? What is the port for ColdFusion's built-in web server? Not your web server, not IIS or Apache, the ColdFusion built-in web server, what you use for the admin. And then you put in that RDS, username and password. Again, I don't have time to get into all that. And then there's a test connection. Well, if you don't do even that, if you don't define that server, you're not going to get the debugging work. If you define the server, but it doesn't test successfully, you're not going to get that debugging to work. You've got to have that working. And I zoomed out so far that we can't see that it's testing successfully. Somewhere up there, it's showing that it's testing successfully because it is working. But anyway, I got to move on. I got to move on. So anyway, you need to do that. And there's a discussion of how to do it. Check it out. And it's a weird looking URL. It's not a mistake. I know it says add ColdFusion Builder VS Code extension. That is the page for adding a server. Mark, let Sarov know. I didn't get a chance to let him know. That's a problem. But anyway, for now, that URL takes you to the page that shows how to set up servers. All right. And then next, you have to define a project in ColdFusion Builder, a project that holds your CF code. And it has to be inside of what's called a workspace. All right. And that's done up here. I just want to tell you, I have time to show you. That's up here. There's a button for creating a project or importing a project. And that walks you through the process of a workspace and all that stuff. And then once you've done that, you have to edit that project to point it to your server. Well, again, a lot of people do some of this, but they don't do all of it. So you got to edit the project, and you'll see when you edit the project, there's a place to say what server, what instance, what of those servers we had on the left, you'll be shown which ones you have, and you'll connect your project to that server. And again, that's discussed in this documentation. So again, I know I don't have time to demonstrate it. I wanted to, but we got to move on. There's the docs for it, right? If nothing else, now you know where to go look. And then lastly, you open a file, and it's got to be a file in a project. So if the file isn't in a project, you can't debug it. But if you open a file, it's in a project. And if you set a breakpoint, and there's a way to do that, and that's discussed in the docs, and then you turn on the debugger, and that's discussed in the docs. There's a button in the in the interface to do that. I'll just show you real quick. If I'm looking at some code, up here, there's buttons, and one of them says debug file. So yeah, if you've got a CF template open, or CFC, and you're in CF Builder, you will see the option to debug. Now, it won't work if you don't do everything I just said. You have to set a breakpoint, have it open a file in a project, define the project, point to the server, have the server successfully talk to RDS. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong that would make that not work. And that's why a lot of people say, it doesn't work for me. Well, it does work. I've been showing people how to do it for years. And then you can either run the request in your browser or choose to run or debug it. Either way, doesn't matter. It would run, and then it would be intercepted. And I see some questions coming up. Okay. Yeah. So you see Eclipse. So I talk about doing that. There you go. Workshop topic. Yeah, that would be a good workshop topic. Mark, I'd be open to doing that if you guys are interested. I've already booked my plane. That would kind of suck, but we could talk about that later. Anyway, and I'll be doing a talk at CF Summit about CF Builder. I don't know if I'd really be able to get into showing all these steps of doing the debugging, because that's just one of Builder's many features. It's not a talk on debugging. It's a talk on getting started with CF Builder. So we'll see. Anyway, cool. Yep, CF Builder 2016. Okay. Personally never had a good experience. Right. And so, Luke, I'm telling you, I help people all the time with what they say isn't working with VS Code. I can help you. If you're interested, I help people all the time get that stuff working. So that's it. If you get all that stuff right, it works. There's a lot of moving parts. It can be hard to get working. I did a prezzo on solving common problems with the old one, and those concepts still apply to the new one. And that talk is right here. I'll just say, if you want to go look at that talk, there's a PDF, and I think there's even a video of it. And some quick tips when you're trying to use the CF Builder feature to run the template. I just want to point this out. Try using that feature to run it. When I was in here, like, let me, right, I'm going to try to run this example right here. and I don't think it's going to run because I don't have it set up. Right? So see, it says an error occurred while running the file. I don't currently have a project set up. I did earlier. It's gone. I'm not going to waste time. If this file was open in a project, and if that project was connected to a server, then when I tell it to run it, it would open my browser the way that project has been told in the server to run pages. Okay. Well, if you can't run it, you can't debug it. All right. So that, again, all these little things, if you don't get them right, it won't work. And then lastly, check this out, not lastly, but among the last things, if you sit at a breakpoint for a long time, your page may time out, your request may time out. In the ColdFusion admin, you know there's a CF timeout on the first settings of the first page of the admin is the request timeout feature. And you can also set it in your code with CF setting request timeout equals some number of seconds. And you can do that in script as well as tags. So you might need to increase the timeout of CF pages to run for you to be able to debug it and be stepping through it and all that stuff. But the point is, and I was going to show a demo, but we were just out of time. If you get all that working, yes, you could set a breakpoint in a CF page and it'll be intercepted in your CF builder. And now you can step through the code line by line, watching variables, all kinds of cool stuff. Lastly, if you do have CF builder and CF on separate machines, there's a thing called debug mappings, and you have to configure that. And I just want to show you that's down here in CF builder. Let me maximize it. It's this little praying hands icon. I don't know what to call it, but it's down here at the bottom called debug mappings. And that says, you click add and you say, how's the code defined locally and how's the code known to the server? And it just discusses this. So I'll leave you to look into that. If you don't get that right, again, it won't work. And then lastly, if things don't work, hey, just try restarting CF Builder, maybe even your whole machine. I've seen times when you made a mistake during the first setup and some background Java process got opened by CF Builder and it's not letting it work even though you fixed everything. So yes, that's the last step, is try that. Couple bonus topics, step debugger and builder, and Fusion Reactor doesn't involve VS Code, doesn't involve RDS. I've given talks on that. I'll leave you to look into that. Lucy's got a step debugger in their Lucy debug extension. It also requires configuration of things. And then Boxlang has a step debugger. So step debugging is great. It's not new to ColdFusion. Some people say, hey, we've got it now, and ColdFusion doesn't. No, ColdFusion's had it for 25 years. It's just if you don't get it configured right, everybody says it doesn't work. So wrapping up, just the last couple things. There's some more resources I want to point you to. The Learn CF in a Week site has a discussion of error handling and debugging, and one on error handling and one on debugging. That's what that is. And then the Modern CFML in 100 Minutes book, which is online, has a whole discussion of exception management. So those are in addition to all the Adobe stuff that I showed you. So that's it. Lots of ways that errors can happen. With the right techniques, you can help find and solve them. There's error handling and logs. There's debugging and step debugging. I just wanted to whet your appetite. I know we went an hour and 15 minutes, but I wanted to whet your appetite with things to consider and for you to learn more about the options and find the resources. So with that, here's my contact information. Feel free to email me, reach out to me on these social media. Again, the slides for the talk are available there on my website. And I'll look real quick at personally advocate. I'm just watching the last few things. I still have an issue with HomeSite Plus. Yeah, well, we're not going to talk about HomeSite Plus today. Yep. All right, cool. Yep. Thank you, everybody. We're right on time. Good time to get out of here for the next session to start. Mark, definitely clear out this chat. Once you stop the recording, don't forget to clear out this chat because nobody in the next session is going to want to be looking through all this crud. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your comments there. And yes, CF Builder.